residence.
Motherfucker. How dare you interrupt my beauty sleep?
A rabbit. Some guard dog.
Whoever said I was a guard dog? Do I look like a canine to you?
I just met you and you already give me a headache. Listen.
No thank you.
Shut up. Do you know someone called Campbell Cornwall, and where can I find him?
You mean the red-haired single Pringle?
Red hair? I was meaning... Hold on. The otherworldly lifeform I'm seeking is an alternate Campbell? This is interesting.
Interesting? Are you looking for a date with him?
No! Learn to zip your lips or I will do it for you!
I think I'm good. And no, he doesn't live here. It's always just been me and your mum.
Oh fuck this shit, I am never coming back here again!
You protected Campbell's whereabouts?
Shut up. Don't get used to it. Besides, if he's gone, I'll have no one else to bully other than you, and your character is completely boring.
I can see why you both dislike each other. Anyways, I'll be out on another one of my daily recons. Have fun.
Campbell dislikes me.
Let me regale you with this tale. I was scrolling across YouTube just minding my own business until I decided to search up Overrated Games list, don't ask me, and I found this video made by a relatively new channel by the name of Top 10 Hidden Facts. Yeah, Overrated Games lists are somehow not dead. I am just as shocked as you are. Even though it's their first list and second video, that doesn't mean it isn't safe from any flaws. Not helped by the fact that barely anyone knows how to do overrated games lists. What people find overrated is highly subjective since not everyone is going to have the same opinion as you, but your reasoning as to why plays a major role in them. Said reasonings in these kinds of countdowns fail 99% of the time since there's sometimes, I don't get the hype behind this game, or it's not as good as you make it out to be. This video in question is rather unique, to say the least. Don't worry, you'll get the full picture once we start this. I just also want to point out that this is the very first list on their channel, and as someone in the SEC who is quite possibly some of the most experienced with doing countdowns, early countdowns are going to age by quite a lot. Thank goodness you don't have to cover another one of these kinds of videos this time, Bolt. You lucky motherfucker. You know, I'm not normally one to complain about intros, as I think it's pretty good for the most part. Your text and color choices are kept in line with the channel logo quite well in my opinion. But then there's this part once the 16-second mark reaches, which feels a little bit out of place from the rest of the intro. When you change it up to blue and green compared to the pink and orange you went for your original style. A different logo and a different font altogether. 21 seconds is at least an appropriate amount of time for a channel intro, especially in this day of age. But I felt like if you took out that last part, then I would have no complaints whatsoever.
Whoa. What the fuck?!
When Fortnite launched in 2017, it was everywhere. It promised a unique battle royale experience with shooting, building, and survival elements. Plus regular updates to keep the game fresh and exciting. And don't forget those weird dance moves. No wonder it has become such a cultural phenomenon, but here's the thing, after playing for a while, you find Fortnite's core game loop repeating itself.
I'll give you the benefit of the doubt for having weird gaps and pauses between your sentences since you're just starting and finding your style in your list. I feel you, buddy. But keep in mind for future videos to cut any unnecessary pauses that don't need to be in there. To be fair, I don't know what editor you use for video making. I'm guessing Adobe Premiere, but on that or every other editor for that matter, you have the ability to cut out pauses. As a suggestion, it's best to do that so that the video doesn't pad out a bit and that your commentary is kept very consistent and well thought out.
It's fun at first, but gets boring quickly. And the construction mechanic that was supposed to be so special? They often lead to frustrating encounters where players can quickly build huge structures and defeat their opponents.
that one's not really the fault of the game, but more so how skilled the player really is with constructing in the game. While you aren't wrong on the fact that it does lead to frustrating encounters, to use that as an example on why you consider Fortnite overrated isn't really a good enough argument. For example, the Pixel Painters minigame from Fall Guys can only be an annoying minigame if you have a teammate that just runs across all the tiles or doesn't know what they're doing, which happens more too often in my playtime. While Snowball Survival actually is not that good of a minigame due to bad camera issues that could potentially eliminate you. The key difference here being that one of them is the fault of a player while the other is the fault of a minigame. Building in Fortnite requires a ton of practice and skill to pull off, and if you encounter a player with fantastic building skills, then you're at a major disadvantage if you aren't that good. I understand if you don't like the building mechanic in Fortnite, hell, I even agree with you to an extent. But again, it's not the game's fault, but more so based on the skill level of the overall player.
To make matters worse, when it comes to game updates, cosmetic items often take precedence over gameplay changes or fixes. Even if you have an interesting character, the gameplay is still unbalanced and frustrating. All in all, it's an overrated game.
What happened to your audio at the end here? I'll touch more into the audio once I get around to it, but it's a bit of an issue here when it fades alongside the rest of the video's sound quality. As for the Fortnite update problems you mentioned, while there are new cosmetics every update, it's not usually the primary focus of the game. And I can agree with you a bit when you say that the game is unbalanced, but Epic Games' attempts to fix balancing issues such as removing overpowered weapons from a game and increasing or decreasing weapon damage is two examples. Most updates can include changing the design of the map, like influencing the theming of the season update, removing and or adding towns in the game, and there's always that one area in the arena where you can raid and kill bots. Not to mention that the game usually changes up game options by removing and adding new game modes. Rest in peace, Playground. May the heavens be nice to you, sir.
Okay, let's talk about Minecraft.
I know the audio was weird just earlier, but oh my goodness, what happened here? We're lucky that this happens only in this entry, but that doesn't stop it from looking very distracting and kinda choppy from the rest of the video. This is an easy issue to fix, as you can just zoom in the clip so it fits with the 16:9 widescreen ratio of the overall video. Noticeable problems like these probably won't make your audience listen properly, as they'll maybe be too distracted with the black void from Phantasma happening.
Huh? I definitely pressed X! I definitely pressed X! Bruh!
The game developers promised players an unlimited world to explore and create, and they kept that promise. The huge game world offers you endless opportunities to build and explore. However, the game can get a bit sleepy after a while. Of course you can build anything with blocks, but why? The lack of a real story or purpose can feel pointless.
Objection!
To answer the why and the lack of story, that is the point of Minecraft. The game was created to give you total creative freedom, with your imagination being your only limit. Plus, Minecraft is pretty much a building simulator video game, so a story isn't really needed. As I've stated in my review I did on Waifu Impact, while a story can help increase the review scores, it's not always a requirement. Games such as the Ancient Artifacts, which we all know as Pong, Breakout, and Tetris, don't need one, as they are kinds of games that are meant for simple fun and enjoyment that anybody can pick up. Hell, you could make the exact same arguments about other games from more modern days, such as Super Mario Maker and Farming Simulator, for what you're saying about Minecraft. Also, the game making the player sleepy depends on the kind of player. Another flaw that is a common occurrence throughout these cliche lists is that subjectivity is usually assigned as a basis for the user's reasoning. Subjectivity in itself is not wrong, far from it, but it all leads to someone's taste and preference, which isn't a sign of something being overrated. To provide an example, I am not a fan of sports video games like most people are, but I wouldn't consider them overrated because they're not my kind of game. I just don't like them because they're not my kind of game. The lack of story in Minecraft doesn't make the game pointless as you make it out to be. Your critique isn't completely invalidated since yes, a lot of the gameplay in certain games usually have a point where the gameplay is connected through the story, such as sandbox games with a mission system, in-game dialogue across the gameplay. Even murder mystery stories such as Danganronpa require you to pay close attention to the story so you, as the player, can gather clues and provide evidence to catch the culprit. But at the same time, you pretty much make your own adventure in Minecraft itself unless you're these games in a franchise where there are actual stories with reasonings for being there. One of which is literally in the title of the game itself and made by a company that makes interactive story-based games.
What? I got an S right.
COD: Infinite Warfare was highly anticipated when it released in 2016, but did it live up to expectations? The game promised an immersive single-player campaign and an intense multiplayer experience with cutting-edge graphics and new game mechanics, but the reality was very different. The single-player campaign was unforgettable, with a boring storyline that didn't engage players. The multiplayer experience was also disappointing due to the lack of innovation.
Well, fuck me and take my money. This was the last game I expected to be on a list about overrated games. Where did you get the insinuation that Infinite Warfare is considered overrated? Is it because it's the highest selling game of 2016? Is it because it won a couple awards at the Game Awards? Because those are two of the most common ideas I can get with what you thought, since the elaboration on why in this segment was actually little to none. While loved by critics and journalists, most people and even fans actually didn't think it was a good game and actually hated it. And while some people are becoming a bit more accepting on Infinite Warfare, they mainly see it as an underrated title than anything else. Meaning it probably shouldn't have a spot on the list and feels totally out of place. Also, the entry is placed higher than it should be, given how Infinite Warfare isn't as popular or as well received as Fortnite and Minecraft. Mainly Minecraft, two entries beforehand that imploded the gaming world with massive addiction. Lastly, going over what I mentioned about the big lack of elaboration here. Compared to your previous entries, which are almost a minute long, this one just lasts 28 seconds and your reasons are very vague. Like, I understand that with Fortnite and Minecraft there's more to talk about with them than Infinite Warfare, but you could have elaborated more on the story and the multiplayer, especially when you say that the multiplayer has a lack of innovation, which can be confusing to not just me, but to others as well. Since I have never played the game, the info you present to an outsider would have no knowledge unless you explain in proper detail.
GTA 5 promised players a huge open world full of unique characters and interesting stories to explore. And to be fair, that promise was kept. The game world is huge and detailed, and there is a lot to do and discover. However, the plot of the game can be random. While some characters are compelling and well written, others feel one-dimensional, and cliché of the game's tone can also be annoying, with humorous moments that seem out of place in a game that deals with serious issues like drug dealing and organized crime.
I think now is a good time to bring the elephant in the room up, but the audio balancing in this video hurts harder than Will Smith at the Oscars. In all seriousness, the balancing in this entire video has some issues. The text-to-speech dialogue has the volume increased or decreased at each entry. A good example is the transition from Minecraft to Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, where the dialogue just suddenly has its audio increased high up.
While they have their charm, they're not for everyone. COD: Infinite Warfare was highly anticipated when it released in 2016, but did it live up to expectations?
This particular segment especially is probably where the balance is at its absolute worst, since both dialogue and background music bleeds in together, making it very hard to hear what you're saying. This is a simple fix though. I recommend actually setting up what number you think the volume should be adjusted to for the charm of future videos. Here's what I mean by this. For my voice, I always set it up to 200% because 100% makes it hard for the audience to hear what I'm saying. But it depends on what mic you're using, and I use a built-in mobile mic. But in the case of text-to-speech dialogue, keeping it at 100% should be fine if I'm gonna be real. But with background music, I usually keep it between 17% or lower because most of the time any higher than that can bleed in with the lines. Now then, as for the segment itself, while GTA does deal with very serious issues indeed, that doesn't mean the game can't throw in jokes that can't balance with the tone. If you really think about it, the dialogue for the game actually has that charm of realism. since all of the lines here actually feel like how actual people would interact with one another, whether it be through family drama like with Michael and his wife and kids, simple relaxation or venting conversations. The threats also almost sound real too, especially tied with the humor. Everything here sounds realistic thanks to the game's dialogue crossing together with the actors' phenomenal acting too. So the game's tone isn't actually out of place, since said tone could also be applied to the rest of the games in the franchise, such as San Andreas and GTA 4.
Right, a nice and clean death right in the beginning of the fucking game. Fuck you! Fuck you, Sonic!
The Last of Us is a video game that has definitely captured our hearts. This game was hugely popular when it was released in 2013, but is it still relevant today?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm gonna say yes.
The game features an immersive story and intense gameplay in a post-apocalyptic world overrun by infected humans. And honestly, the story was touching and heartbreaking and the gameplay intense and challenging. However, players have criticized the game mechanics for being repetitive, as gameplay changes little throughout the story.
Damn. Though, what was I expecting? Let me ask you a question. If players have criticized the game mechanics' repetitiveness, the players themselves, why is The Last of Us on this list in the first place, let alone at number 6, topping it with you praising the story and the gameplay? I'm so confused, because the criteria for ranking these games is actually next to none. I'm not even sure if there is an actual criteria. It just feels like a video called the 10 most overrated video games of all time rather than the top 10 most overrated video games of all time. Top 10 lists have ranking criteria for how and why each entry is placed, but judging from the placements here, there doesn't seem to be any, making this list a disorganized mess.
There we go. No.
Interestingly, for its time, Halo Combat Evolved's single-player campaign was challenging, with an immersive storyline that kept players hooked from start to finish.
Holy, that was an abrupt transition from The Last of Us to Halo. Geez, you really gotta warn me next time, mate. But really though, it sounded like you had more to say for The Last of Us, but it cut off to the next segment. Abruptions like those can make your videos very disorienting.
The game's multiplayer mode was also excellent, with addictive gameplay and unique weapons that made every match fresh and exciting. However, the game mechanics might feel dated by today's standards. The game's shooting mechanics can feel sluggish and imprecise, and the game's AI can be frustratingly stupid. Additionally, graphics have not aged well and can be off-putting to gamers used to more realistic graphics.
As opposed to every other game at that time and prior, graphical limitations are not the fault of Halo, since technology wasn't powerful back then to make an ultra-realistic looking game compared to what we have today. While there are people out there that will find an old game off-putting if they play realistic looking games, it's themselves that are not used to control schemes, the graphics, and basically anything that was extremely limited due to the hardware capabilities.
Dude, let's be Japanese! Jesus Christ, Hedgehog! E for exceptional bullshit.
Although the game was groundbreaking when it was released, it hasn't aged as well as you might think. For those who played it back then, it's still a fun and nostalgic trip down memory lane.
Games that age poorly don't clarify a game as being overrated, since back then, the games would have been revolutionary for its time, from which Halo was. But it feels like a point is being missed here. You could put any game on here where they really show their age and the argument wouldn't work.
And you know what that is like, don't you?
Frick off, furry face! That was before, this is now.
And even now, you're still a dumbass.
At least I'm thinking about improving people, all you think about is pissing me the hell off. Anyways, let's have the age arguments of a pile of stupid statements, as if we hadn't had enough on that pile already.
Do 90% of those include yours?
I hope you sleep on pointy rocks tonight. Moreover, going on from my last point as well, while Halo can be a game people can go back to for nostalgia, new players can definitely get into the franchise too with the older games, since not only is the game easy to pick up and play, but the Master Chief Collection also introduces the game to a new generation of gamers for modern platforms.
Yeah, Big Mama selling narcotica. How much do it cost, bitch? None zip nada.
However, some players find that progress in the game depends too much on how much time or money the player is willing to invest. This has created a rift in the gaming community between the who want to work late or pay in-game bonuses, and those who don't, and in-game content can be intimidating and overwhelming for new players. It can be difficult to advance without the help of others, and the game's emphasis on group content can prevent solo players from fully enjoying the game.
You know, you aren't really wrong in some parts about how much players will invest, since the microtransactions and other paid bonuses can definitely turn people away from World of Warcraft. But at the same time, you're basically already paying through the subscriptions. World of Warcraft is only free right up until you reach level 20, which then you have to start handing over your wallet. I know many people don't like the idea of having to pay monthly or yearly subscriptions to play games, but for MMORPGs, tell me what other and what better way they could do for a genre such as this. Companies need to make money from an MMO somehow, and this was the best way they could do it. P.S. Blizzard also worked their way around for those that don't want to set up a subscription to get 60 days of game time for only $29, which I must say is a pretty good deal. They did have game time options for 30 days, 90 days, and 180 days, but were removed from March 25, 2021 onward. Also, advancing will become more difficult without the help of others. You could say it emphasizes the motivation of MMOs, since the genre literally encourages and is built upon assistance and cooperation through other players to win battles easier. Sure, you can stick around staying a solo player for the first few hours, but as the acronym states, the genre will be built against that as you progress, encouraging you to tag along with other players. I seriously don't get how you missed the point of World of Warcraft, an MMORPG, a massively multiplayer online role-playing game.
Half-Life 2 is a game that, when it was released, was meant to be the ultimate first-person shooter. And then it failed in several key areas. First, the game pace can be painfully slow at times. Long periods of exposure and puzzle solving can drag on indefinitely, making the game feel more like a chore than a fun and engaging experience. And while you value a good story as much as the next player, sometimes you just want to shoot some baddies and blow it all up, you know? But perhaps the biggest disappointment for me was the game's ending. After all that build-up and all those hours spent slogging through the slow-paced story, the ending was just lackluster. It left many players feeling unfulfilled and wondering what the point of it all was. We won't spoil it for those who haven't played it, but suffice it to say, it's not the kind of ending that will leave you feeling unsatisfied. And yet, for some reason, Half-Life 2 was still considered a masterpiece when it was released. Sure, there were moments, but overall it was a slow and disappointing experience that didn't quite live up to its potential.
Am I even watching the same list? I swear, when I said that this was a unique overrated games list, sweet mother of all things Lady Palatina, you wish I was joking. The scripting throughout most of this video doesn't even feel like a script made for an overrated games list, but more so for a list about disappointing games, which I know was not your intention to do so, but given the structure of this video and what you said at the beginning...
As gamers, we've all been victims of the hype at some point. We spent our hard-earned cash, eagerly opened the game, and sat down to play, only to be disappointed with what we found.
It definitely did feel like a disappointing games list, which again, I know wasn't your intentions, don't get me wrong. Okay, now we're getting into the number 1 segment. This should be good.
Okay, let's focus on things in Super Mario 64.
Don't you mean Super Mario 64 DS? Don't get me wrong, there isn't anything actually wrong with him using the DS footage since Super Mario 64 DS is still a remaster of Mario 64 at the end of the day. Just kind of funny in a way.
Yes, it was a groundbreaking 3D platformer when it was released, but looking back, it was grossly overrated. The game promised us a great 3D world to explore, but some levels were boring and monotonous. And the camera controls were an absolute nightmare, often making the game more frustrating than enjoyable.
The camera controls, I can see where you take issues with, but in all fairness, 3D gaming was still incredibly new for 1996, especially for an open exploration style game. So controlling the camera in games with a brand new style for gaming of course isn't going to be perfect. You don't have to like it. But you need to understand that controlling the game's point of view with the Z-axis and in a 3D setting at that time has never really been done before. So gaming companies were still trying to figure it out. Just like how I'm still trying to figure out the one-on-one ways to prepare the best delicious rabbit meat in the whole wide world.
You're such a fucking asshole.
Said a fucking asshole.
And the focus is on collecting stars and coins? It felt more like a cheap way to extend playtime than an immersive and rewarding experience.
So apparently the main objective of the overall premise for the gameplay is a cheap way to extend playtime? Oh, you couldn't be more wrong, my good sir. Besides, how does it feel like it? Since the stars are your main focus of progressing through Peach's castle and unlocking more levels to continue through the game. And you don't even have to collect all the stars to beat the game. With the grand total of 120 stars to collect in Super Mario 64, the final Bowser fight only requires 70 of them. Besides, if you focus on the main objectives only, the game is only 12 hours, which isn't actually that long of a game. Besides, another 3D collectathon from its time, Banjo-Kazooie, rounds up to 11 hours, near the exact time as Super Mario 64, so at the time, it was a reasonable length for 3D collectathon games. And as for the coins, they've been with the franchise since Super Mario Bros. On the NES, and that tradition carries over with the franchise to today. TLDR, I don't see your issue at all.
The lack of level variety, frustrating camera controls, and uninspiring core mechanics make it seem more like a money grab or a slap in the face to fans than a well-crafted game.
Oh, wow. That's it. Huh. Anyways, time to argue one last time. There is no way you just said that the game has a lack of level variety. Every level in Mario 64 has their own core design, implementing each star with unique elements exclusive of that star only. Not to mention that every level has their own gimmicks and also can use the environment either built against you or work to your advantage, such as Hazy Maze Cave being a maze, Rainbow Ride's gimmick having a magic carpet across the rainbow, Cocoa Mountain being an actual snowy mountain, and Dire Docks being an underwater level, just to bring up a few examples. So saying that Mario 64 has a lack of level variety is nothing more than a lie. Also, how does this game seem like a money grab or a slap in the face to fans, since a money grab would be an extremely rushed concept that just seemed to appear in store shelves released to the public, aka a shovelware title, which given Super Mario 64 is mostly fleshed out with ideas that are thoughtfully designed and constructed doesn't make it as such. There's also no way that 64 is a slap in the face to the fans if the game received absolute high praise and universal acclaim from both critics and fans. Hell, even to this day, many people still consider this one of the best games in the franchise. And now with that, I want to give out my final thoughts, because this was quite a perplexing countdown. There didn't seem to be a proper criteria present across the list, consequently making your ordering and placing of each game off-putting. Many of the cliche points in overrated games lists, like personal preferences, are just as always not well-constructed reasons. Your text-to-speech dialogue is very messy, the balance of the audio is inconsistent, and most importantly, there was barely any elaboration for most of the list, which ruins the overall pacing of the video. Now then, to be honest, I can't really say I hated this video, since there are points where I do slightly agree with you on, and it is your second video and first list, so of course early videos are going to have rough patches. I do see quite a lot of potential within you from what you presented. I really do wish you the best of luck in your future list, Hidden Facts. My advice I can give is make sure you check and double check everything, not just in terms of dialogue, but also when editing your video. Until then, everybody, I'm User1Campbell, and see you all next time.